So here's the situation. I baked a cake, and now apparently I've given everyone at work the impression I'm quitting. To me, it was just a normal Sunday night impulse. I had cocoa powder, flour, and way too much butter in the fridge. I was bored. Baking helps me relax. So I thought, why not whip up a chocolate cake with ganache? Nothing fancy, no sprinkles spelling out "Goodbye forever." No tear-stained farewell card tucked under the frosting. Just cake. Fast forward to Monday morning, and I stroll into the office like a dessert-bearing hero. I set it down in the break room, sent a quick email. "Cake in the kitchen, help yourself," and thought nothing of it. Honestly, I figured maybe 2 people would take a slice, and the rest would sit there until it got sad and dry. But by noon, the cake was demolished, plates stacked, forks licked clean. Success, right? Except no one just said, "Thanks." They said thanks, with this weird tone, the kind you use when your coworker announces they're moving to another state. "We'll really miss you," one person said. "Best of luck wherever you're headed next," said another. I just blinked at them. Headed next? I was headed back to my desk with a cup of coffee. By the time lunch was over, I had heard at least 4 variations of, "Where are you going?" And one whispered, "Do you think she's going to that startup across town?" Like I had been planning some dramatic exit and forgot to loop myself in. Turns out, there's an unwritten office rule I never knew about. When someone randomly brings in baked goods, it means they're leaving. A farewell cake, a goodbye banana bread, a "don't forget me" tray of brownies. Apparently, this has happened often enough that people just assume sugar equals resignation. No one ever told me this. How was I supposed to know I was breaking the ancient code of corporate pastry? By mid-afternoon, things escalated. My manager swung by my desk with that practiced neutral smile bosses have. You know the one, supportive but also suspicious, like they're about to ask if you've been updating your expense reports. She leaned on my desk and said, "Hey, can we put some time on the calendar tomorrow to talk about your future here?" My stomach dropped. My future here? I love my job. I wasn't planning on leaving at all. But suddenly, I'm sweating like a thief caught with a dozen muffins. The worst part? If I blurt out, "I'm not quitting," without context, I'll sound guilty. If I try to explain, "No, it's just cake," I'll sound unhinged. So now I'm spiraling. Do I pre-bake my defense? Should I bring cookies tomorrow with a giant sticky note that says, "I'm not leaving, I just like sugar"? Or would that make it worse, like doubling down on my weird dessert crime? I tried to act normal after my boss dropped that bomb about my future here. I smiled, nodded, and said, "Sure, just send me the invite." Inside, though, my brain was sprinting around like a hamster on espresso. Was she already writing up my goodbye email draft? Was IT disabling my logins while I innocently sat there eating leftover frosting off a spoon? I messaged my work friend Clara, who always seems to know office gossip 2 hours before it happens. "Hey, random question," I typed. "If someone brings a cake, does that mean they're quitting?" She didn't reply right away, which was concerning. Finally, she sent back, "Wait. You brought the cake, right? Everyone's saying you're leaving. Where are you going?" I almost threw my phone across the desk. "I'm not leaving," I wrote, way too many caps for a work chat. Then I backspaced and rephrased into something calmer. "No plans to leave. Just wanted to bake." She responded with a laughing emoji then. "Okay, but you've accidentally started a rumor. People legit think you're resigning. Even Mark from accounting asked me if you're going to Google." Google? Google doesn't even know my name. At this point, I realized the cake had taken on a life of its own. What began as a casual bake had become an unofficial exit interview. The rest of the afternoon was chaos. At least 5 coworkers stopped by my desk for casual conversations that were very much not casual. One leaned in and whispered, "I totally get it. I won't tell anyone until you announce it officially." Another actually patted my shoulder like I was moving to another country. The piece de resistance was when HR walked past, smiled at me, and said, "We'll be sad to lose you, but I know you'll do great things. What? HR thinks I'm leaving too? Did the cake file my resignation letter on my behalf? By the time I shut down my computer for the day, I felt like I had faked my own corporate funeral. People were smiling at me in the elevator like they wanted to ask for my LinkedIn. My boss's chat was on the calendar for 10 a.m. tomorrow, and I didn't know whether to bring a PowerPoint presentation titled, "Why I Am Not Quitting, a Dessert-Related Misunderstanding," or just cry. At home, I ranted to my roommate. She found it hilarious. "You should totally lean into it," she said between laughing fits. "Make a full buffet tomorrow. Cookies, brownies, cupcakes. Then, at the end, dramatically say, 'I'm not leaving, I just have a sweet tooth.'" I considered it for half a second, but knowing my office, that would probably just escalate things further. They'd assume I was soft launching my resignation with a farewell dessert tour. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining scenarios. Scenario 1. I walk into the meeting and blurt, "I swear I'm not quitting!" My boss raises an eyebrow, HR appears out of thin air, and suddenly I'm filling out exit paperwork for a job I didn't leave. Scenario 2. I try to casually explain, "No, really, I just like baking." But the words come out too defensive, like I'm hiding an offer letter in my pocket. Scenario 3. I panic, and to prove my loyalty, I start listing everything I like about my job, from the free coffee to the ergonomic chairs. That would sound like a hostage video. I briefly entertained Scenario 4, actually quitting, just to make the cake make sense. But then I remembered rent exists. By 2 a.m., I had half convinced myself to whip up a batch of cookies as a peace offering. A big neon note. "This is not a resignation snack." But I also knew that if I walked in tomorrow with more baked goods, it would only add fuel to the fire. People would think it was the official goodbye tour day 2. So I set my alarm, rolled over, and promised myself I'd just go in, sit down with my boss, and clarify everything like a normal human adult. Assuming I could open my mouth without yelling, "IT was just cake," like a deranged raccoon. The next morning, I walked into the office with all the confidence of a squirrel crossing a highway. Every eye felt like it was on me. Someone in the hallway gave me a sympathetic smile. Another coworker mouthed, "Good luck," like I was heading to surgery. When I reached my desk, there was a post-it note waiting for me. "We'll miss your cakes as much as we'll miss you. Marketing team." I wanted to crawl under my chair. At 9:55, my boss pinged me. "Ready to chat in 5? I stared at the screen, my palms sweaty. "Ready? No. Could I run? Possibly." But I squared my shoulders, walked to her office, and sat down. She closed the door gently. "So," she said, "you've been doing great work. I wanted to ask, what are your plans? I want to make sure we support you in this next step." There it was. The cake had spoken louder than I ever could. I swallowed hard. Actually, I don't have any plans. To leave, I mean." My boss tilted her head. "Oh? That's surprising. The whole office seems to think you're moving on." I wanted to scream. "Because of the cake?" Instead, I forced a smile. "Yeah, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I just baked. That's all." Her brows knitted together. "Just baked?" "Yes. Flour, sugar, eggs. Baked." I felt like I was explaining the concept of gravity. There was a pause so long I could hear my own heartbeat. Finally, she leaned back and chuckled. "Well, that explains it. Honestly, I assumed you'd gotten an offer somewhere else. You had that farewell dessert energy." I wanted to demand a definition of farewell dessert energy, but instead I nodded. "Nope. I like it here. I'm not leaving." She laughed again, but her eyes narrowed slightly, like she wasn't fully convinced. "Okay. Good to know. But maybe send out a note to clear things up? People have been buzzing." So that's how I ended up back at my desk drafting the weirdest company-wide email of my life. Subject line: clarification, the cake was just cake. I typed, erased, retyped. Every version looked insane. Hi team, I am not resigning, despite rumors sparked by chocolate cake. Too aggressive. Hey everyone, I'm not quitting. I just like ganache. Too whimsical. Please stop asking where I'm going. I'm going back to my desk. Too snarky. In the end, I settled on, hi all, just to clear up some confusion. I'm not leaving the company. I simply enjoyed baking, and thought you might like some cake. No announcements, no changes, just dessert. Thanks. I hovered over send for a full minute before clicking. Immediately, replies flooded in. Clara. LOL, iconic. Thanks for clarifying. Mark from accounting. So no Google? Darn. HR. Thank you for clearing that up. We'll cancel the exit checklist. Exit checklist? They had a checklist? By the time I'd scrolled through 20 laughing emojis, I realized the damage might be contained. But of course, there was still one problem. I had now branded myself as the Cake Girl. And everyone was waiting for my next move. Around 3 p.m., someone wandered into the break room, looked around, and loudly said, "No cookies today?" Another piped up, "Guess she only bakes when she's quitting." Laughter all around. I wanted to shout, "I'm not a bakery," but instead I smiled weakly and returned to my desk. Now I was stuck in an impossible cycle. If I baked again, I'd fuel the rumor that I was leaving soon. If I didn't bake, people would assume I was sulking about staying. Later that week, a colleague from another department emailed me directly. "Hi, I heard you're transitioning out. Any chance you can recommend someone to take over your projects?" I stared at the email like it had personally insulted me. Transitioning out? I hadn't transitioned anywhere except from buttercream to coffee. Clara leaned over my cubicle wall. "Okay, people are unwell," she whispered, delighted. "There's literally a Slack thread called #DessertGate. Please, no." "Oh yes," she said, opening her laptop like it was a tabloid. "Theories include, you got poached, you're opening a bakery, or you're going to Bali for cake content. Also, Mark from accounting has made a custom cake emoji, and it's getting heavy use." I dropped my head onto my keyboard. This is irreversible, isn't it? Maybe not. Clara paused. You need a rebrand. If the office thinks surprise baked good equals goodbye, then you need to establish a new, louder rule. Surprise baked good equals random acts of sugar. No subtext. How do I do that without sounding like I'm launching a cult? Easy, she said. You make a sign so aggressive it wraps around to wholesome. She typed a mock-up. This dessert means nothing. I'm not leaving. I just like sugar. I groaned. If I bring another dessert, won't that just restart the rumor mill? Only if you bring one pan, she said. You need volume and variety. Pies, bars, cookies. Overwhelmed the narrative. I pictured myself wheeling in a dessert cart like a hotel brunch. It was ridiculous. It was also weirdly compelling. That night, I drafted a plan with the seriousness of a moon landing. Operation to quit my cake. Step 1. Bake things so non-farewell that no one could misinterpret them. Farewell desserts are elegant and nostalgic. I would make aggressively cheerful snacks. Sprinkle heavy cookies. Cupcakes with googly-eyed toppers. A loaf cake iced with "Mondays are fine" in lopsided letters. Step 2. Signage. No room for inference. I grabbed neon index cards and a fat marker. Slogans flowed like a weird ad campaign. Not resigning, just rising, dough. Still employed, also frosted. Committed to this job and also to butter. Step 3. Communication. I drafted a Slack invite to a new channel. #JustBecauseBakeClub. Description. Spontaneous office baking that means nothing about employment status. Membership, anyone with teeth. By midnight, my kitchen looked like a small storm had passed through a pantry. Batter bowls stacked like nesting dolls. The oven cycled trays like a printing press. I put on a podcast to drown out my anxiety and piped crooked smiley faces on cupcakes like a sleep-deprived clown. At 7:30 a.m., I walked into the office hauling 3 reusable grocery bags and the moral certainty of a person who had slept 4 hours and mainline frosting. I set everything up in the break room like a dessert pop-up, taped my neon signs to various surfaces, and waited. The first wave arrived, the early bird sales team. They stared at the signs, then at the treats, then back at me. "You're not leaving?" one ventured. "Not leaving," I said, pointing at the loudest card. "These are loyalty cupcakes." He laughed. "All right then. Loyal me one of those." The second person snapped a photo for Slack. Within minutes, #DessertGate was overtaken by #JustBecauseBakeClub. The custom cake emoji now had a friend, a sticky note emoji that read, "Not leaving. Progress." By 10 a.m., the break room felt like a wholesome political rally. People repeated my slogans back to me as if swearing into dessert office. "Committed to butter but also to my job," a designer recited solemnly while choosing a sprinkle cookie. Even HR came through and, I kid you not, said, "We rescind our imaginary exit paperwork." My boss stopped by, arms crossed but smiling. "This is elaborate." "I'm overcorrecting," I said. "Violently." She nodded at the sign that said, "Mondays are fine." "That one's controversial," she said, taking a cupcake anyway. "Look, I appreciate the clarity. For what it's worth, the team really does value you. The panic came from people not wanting to lose you." That landed like a little warm stone in my chest. "Thanks," I said. "I didn't realize cake carried so much narrative weight here." "Oh yeah," she said. "There's history. 2 people brought banana bread before resigning last year. The trauma lingers." "Banana bread trauma," I said. "I'll alert a counselor." At noon, Clara dragged me to my desk. "You need to see Slack." The thread was a parade of photos, grinning colleagues with cupcakes, captions like, "Staying never tasted so sweet," and a poll, "Which dessert says, I'm not leaving?" The options were confetti cookie, chaotic cupcake, and loyalty loaf. Loyalty loaf won by a landslide despite no one knowing what it was. I typed, "Loyalty loaf is a vibe, not a recipe." Mark from accounting responded with a spreadsheet pun so egregious we agreed to a 1-hour ban on numbers. For a few minutes, the office felt lighter, like we'd collectively survived a tiny storm triggered by ganache. The equilibrium held for 48 hours. On Thursday afternoon, rumors mutated like a game of corporate telephone. If I wasn't leaving, maybe I was staying because I'd been promised something. Promotion gossip bubbled up like soda. Someone whispered that I'd negotiated a secret raise over cupcakes. Someone else said I was angling to transfer teams and had weaponized frosting as leverage. I put my face in my hands. "I can't keep running a PR firm for pastries," I told Clara. She agreed. "You need a final act. A definitive public statement." "What, a press conference? At the microwave?" "Town hall," she said. 2 minutes at the next all hands. Clear the air. Give the people closure. The idea made me want to hibernate, but it also sounded effective. I messaged my boss. "Could I have a minute at Friday's all hands to dispel dessert rumors?" She replied within seconds. "Absolutely." Friday arrived. I had slept, mercifully. I did not bring baked goods. My kitchen and I needed a trial separation. The company crowded into the open space by the giant fern wall. After updates about quarterly goals and a reminder not to microwave fish, my boss gestured to me. "A brief note from our resident baker." I stepped up, palms slightly damp. "Hi. Quick clarification. Earlier this week, I brought a cake because I like baking. This ignited a fascinating sociological experiment where the office decided sugar is a resignation letter. It isn't. I am not leaving. I'm just a person with an oven." Laughter rolled through the room. I continued, "To avoid future confusion, we've launched #JustBecauseBakeClub. Anyone can bring treats anytime, with 0 employment implications. If you need a sign, I have extras. Thank you for coming to my TED Toast." Groans. Applause. Genuine relief. I stepped back, shaky with the adrenaline of telling 200 people I was not a metaphor. After all hands, the mood shifted in a way I didn't expect. People started sharing their own weird office myths. The design team confessed that whenever someone wears a blazer on a Tuesday, they assume there's a surprise investor meeting. IT admitted they dread hearing the phrase, "quick question," more than the word outage. Sales revealed a superstition about pens: never sign a big deal with a brand new pen or it jinxes the renewal. We started calling them folk policies. None were written, all were powerful. Dessertgate had simply exposed one of the silliest. A week later, the hashtag Just Because Bake Club channel had morphed into a wholesome chaos machine. Photos of croissants store-bought proudly, someone's failed meringue, captioned, "Still employed," a poll on whether savory muffins count as a food or a cry for help. I posted a schedule note. "Baking hiatus for me this week. The oven and I are taking space. I'm making a loyalty loaf next week if I can define it." HR, sensing opportunity, asked if we'd like to turn this into a small monthly thing with a charity tie-in. Bring treats, toss a coin into a donation jar, pick a cause. It was such a corporate solution it circled right back to sweet. We voted yes. And because office equilibrium requires balance, Mark from accounting brought a fruit platter labeled, "I don't bake, I just care." It was mostly melon. We clapped anyway. I still get the occasional, "You sure you're not leaving?" accompanied by a grin. But it's a wink now, not a worry. The cake rumor became a company in-joke, like the time the CEO accidentally replied all with 3 fire emojis. 2 Mondays later, I finally tackled the mythical loyalty loaf. I decided it should be something sturdy and comforting, not flashy, the baked good equivalent of a reliable coworker who remembers your birthday and your preferred font. I went with a cinnamon swirl loaf, the kind that slices into neat spirals like a hypnotist's wheel. Iced, "Stay" on top in blocky letters that looked like they paid taxes. When I said it in the break room, I didn't need 10 signs. 1 card did the work. "Loyalty loaf, a carb that says I'm still here." People loved it. Someone suggested we standardize it as the official non-departure cue. If the office ever spirals again, deploy the loaf. By afternoon, my boss stopped by with a grin. "So, when you do actually leave someday, how are you going to tell us?" "Banana bread," I said without thinking. We both doubled over laughing. Here's the weirdest part. The whole mess made my job feel more mine. Somehow, clarifying that I wanted to be here made me show up in a bigger way. I volunteered to lead a messy cross-team project because I suddenly cared about the story we tell ourselves at work, that we're replaceable, that nothing sticks. But apparently cake sticks. Rumors stick. So maybe loyalty can too. Clara snapped a photo of me slicing the loaf and captioned it, "Local employee defeats corporate folklore with cinnamon." The custom emojis exploded again. Someone mocked up a poster of me like a vintage ad. "Try loyalty loaf, now with 0% turnover." HR asked if they could put it on the internal wiki. I said yes, as long as no one uses it in performance reviews. I still bake when I'm stressed. I still overthink subject lines. But the next time I carry a dessert through our lobby, people don't whisper about my future. They ask for the recipe. And I tell them, loudly, that the secret ingredient is staying. The week after Loyalty Loaf, HR launched the official Just Because Bake Club page on the internet, complete with a banner that looked like clip art married a PDA flyer. There were FAQs. Actual FAQs. Question: does bringing dessert imply a change in employment status? No. We promise. Someone, almost certainly Mark, added. Question: what dessert would imply a change in employment status? Banana bread, historical precedent. I was equal parts mortified and delighted. Mostly, though, I was relieved. For the first time since the original ganache incident, I could walk into the break room without a Greek chorus whispering about my LinkedIn. People were back to normal office conversations, printer jams, a bug ticket that refused to die, whether the coffee tasted, toasted, or haunted. That afternoon, my boss pinged me with a calendar invite titled, "Your future here, dessert free." I stared at it, then accepted. When I stepped into her office, she waved me toward a chair. "No secret agenda," she said. "All I wanted from our first chat was to talk about your growth." The cake hijacked the narrative. She laid out something simple. A project I'd been quietly holding together could become an official initiative. I could lead it. Not because of frosting. Because I was already doing the work. "We can get you a mentor from product and carve out 2 hours a week for leadership training," she said. "If you want it." There's an odd, fizzy feeling when someone sees you clearly at work, not the folklore version, not the rumor version, just you. "I do," I said. My voice surprised me by not wobbling. When I left her office, Clara was waiting in the hallway like a reporter after a verdict. "Well?" "Promotion-ish," I whispered. "More responsibility. Real support." Clara fist pumped. From cake panic to career arc, honestly iconic. The next bake club fell on a Friday. We'd voted to support a local food bank. There was a tiny donation jar shaped like a strawberry and a spreadsheet tracking who brought what. Mark couldn't help himself. I arrived dessert-free this time, determined to enjoy the event as a civilian. A new hire in support brought a tray of chaotic brookies, brownie cookie hybrids, that had spread into each other like tectonic plates. "I messed up the pan," she said, cheeks pink. "Also, I'm not quitting. I learned the rules." "Perfect," I said, taking a gooey corner. "Our culture is thriving." Midway through the sugar blur, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Jonas from Product, the rumored mentor. He was older in a reassuring way, like a sturdy bookshelf. "I hear you're taking point on the cross-team initiative," he said. "Want to grab 15 minutes Monday?" We found a huddle room. He asked questions that made my brain light up: what outcomes mattered, where the bottlenecks hid, how to prove success without drowning in metrics. He didn't try to own it. He tried to make it easier for me to. I left with a simple outline, 3 sticky notes, and the feeling of pointy problems turning rounder. On Slack, Bake Club had started sharing recipes in threads. Someone asked for the loyalty loaf formula. I posted my scribbled version and added a warning. "If you stay on it, do it with confidence. The loaf can smell fear." Emojis rained down. At 4 p.m., Facilities posted a stern message. "Reminder, please do not place cakes on the printer." Which meant, obviously, that someone had placed a cake on the printer. The attached photo showed a forlorn bunt perched like a crown. Caption: "I am not leaving, I'm just collating." The printer had never been more beloved. The universe, sensing balance, decided to test it. The following Wednesday, an email went out: "All staff, farewell for Priya from design, join us Friday for cupcakes." You could feel the office freeze like a wildlife documentary. Everyone turned to look at me, as if I were the newly appointed dessert czar who must sanction this ritual. I DM'd Priya. "Are you actually leaving or accidentally leaving?" "Actually," she replied, laughing. "New role, closer to family. And yes, cupcakes. But I checked with you first in spirit." Friday came. A tasteful display appeared in the lounge, vanilla cupcakes with tiny paper flags that read, "Good luck." It was gentle and intentional and, crucially, announced. No folklore, just facts. I stood with Priya as people hugged her, signed a card, and took a cupcake like a small, edible goodbye. "Thanks for de-weaponizing dessert," she said to me. "I heard about your cake saga. Legend. Happy to serve," I said. "May your new job have printers that jam less." After the party, someone in #JustBecauseBakeClub posted a new guideline we all agreed to: spontaneous equals zero meaning. Announced equals a real thing. We didn't need rules for everything. But we needed a few signposts, so the myths didn't eat us alive. That afternoon, I presented the first milestone plan for the project I was leading. There were slides. There were even transitions. Jonas sat in the back, nodding occasionally like a benevolent owl. When I finished, our VP said, "Clear path, clear risks, clear asks? Keep going." I walked back to my desk with the ridiculous urge to bake a celebration cake and the wiser impulse to simply breathe. My desk plant, a heroic pothose, had unspooled a new leaf. Clara texted, "Poth us promotion." We were all unwell, and I loved us. With momentum came meetings, the kind that clone themselves if you don't draw a circle of salt. I set 2 rules for myself. 1. No. Quick question, calendar invites. You either write it down or schedule a real slot. And 2. Every meeting ends 5 minutes early, or I owe the team a cookie. I kept the cookie rule secret, but my calendar began to look like a bakery debt ledger, so I quietly learned to land planes faster. Meanwhile, Bake Club hit critical mass. Someone proposed a savory month, and unleashed quiches like flying saucers. An engineer introduced mystery bakes, where you had to guess the ingredient. The answers ranged from tahini to Mountain Dew. Morale lurched but survived. The donation jar got heavy. Accounting counted it in front of us like a game show reveal, and we wowed at our own generosity. One morning, I opened my inbox to a message from the CEO, short, kind, and maybe the most validating sentence I've ever gotten at work. Saw your all-hands talk. Culture is built in tiny myths. Thanks for helping us rewrite one. It wasn't framed on my wall, but it lived rent-free in my brain. That night, I baked a sheet of bar cookies for my neighbors and laughed at myself in the glow of the oven. A month ago, the sight of parchment paper had triggered corporate panic. Now it felt like what it had always been, a small way to say, "I'm here." Staying isn't flashy. It's 1,000 little nudges toward better. Sometimes those nudges are frosted. When I brought the leftover corners to work, unannounced, no one asked where I was going. Someone just said, "Are those the tahini ones? Sprinkle some salt on top." Growth. Of course, the office still had its quirks. A rumor flared that the espresso machine was haunted because it hissed whenever the CFO walked by. Turned out it needed descaling, which is a metaphor for something, probably. Another myth claimed facilities would grant any request if you couched it as a safety issue. Untrue. They will not install a nap pod to prevent hallway tripping. My project hit its first real snag when a dependency slipped 2 weeks. Old me would have quietly absorbed the delay like a paper towel. New, loaf-wielding me wrote a clear note. Here's the block, here's the impact, here's my proposed workaround, here's what I need. It felt like saying, "I'm still here," in a more adult dialect. People rallied. We cut scope in a way that made the outcome cleaner. The VP thanked me for the visibility. That afternoon, Clara and I sat on the windowsill with paper cups of coffee and a contraband orange. "You know," she said, peeling the orange like she had somewhere kinder to be, "you never did answer the big question." "What big question?" "When you actually leave someday," she said, serious now. "How will you do it?" I grinned. "I'll whisper it into a banana bread." She groaned. "We deserve that." Then softer, "I hope you stay a long time." "Me too," I said. And I meant it. Not because everything was perfect, but because imperfect things had been named, laughed at, and organized into something human. The myths didn't run the place anymore. We did. The quarter closed on a Thursday. The project rolled across the line not with confetti cannons but with a tidy checklist and a "ship it" emoji that looked like a tugboat. We had cut 3 features that no longer mattered and polished 2 that did. During the retrospective, I tried an experiment. We listed tiny myths that helped. End meetings early, write it down, name the block, and tiny myths we retired. Cake equals quitting, new pen equals jinx. People added their own, some silly, some sharp. The room felt smarter. Afterward, I walked past the break room and saw someone had taped up my original neon card. The one that screamed, "This dessert means nothing." It was sun-faded now, curling at the corners. Someone had doodled a little badge on it, cultural artifact. I laughed out loud, alone, which is peak office behavior. On my way out, my boss caught me. "By the way," she said, "I put your name in for the Q3 leadership cohort. It's not a promotion, it's runway. You've earned it." I thought about all the ways this story could have gone. Me saying nothing, rumors calcifying, a good job made weird by silence. Instead, there was cake, then chaos, then clarity, then cinnamon. I'd learned something unglamorous and huge. At work, narratives are like plants. If you don't tend them, they grow anyway, toward the messiest light. I texted Clara a picture of the curled neon sign. She replied with a new custom emoji, my face cartooned into a loaf, eyebrows determined caption, staying. I put my phone away, held the elevator door for a stranger, and thought, not for the first time, I'm not leaving. I'm just here. And tomorrow maybe I'll make scones. Not because I'm quitting. Because there's joy in feeding a place you've decided to keep. Leadership cohort orientation happened in a windowless room that tried very hard to be inspiring. There was a poster that said, Own the Y, above a ficus that had clearly given up on all Ys months ago. 12 of us sat in a circle with little name placards, like a jury for workplace feelings. The facilitator asked us to share a moment when we shifted a microculture. I nearly choked on my coffee because apparently my legacy is pastry legislation. When it was my turn, I told the truth in 2 sentences. I brought a cake. Everyone thought I was quitting. We made new rules so dessert could be dessert again. The room laughed, but not unkindly. A guy from sales said, There's a weird power in naming the superstition out loud. It loses its teeth. The product person next to him added, Or you get new teeth, but at least you know where the bite is. We spent the morning translating small office myths into actual, fixable rituals. We don't ping people after hours. Became, we schedule send and set expectations in the calendar description. We hate status meetings. Became, we write weekly one-pagers and only meet if the doc raises flags. The facilitator called these behavioral handles. I called them places to grab when the day is slippery. At lunch, Jonas found me by the sad ficus. How's the cohort? He asked. Oddly satisfying, I said. Like untangling headphones. He nodded. Keep collecting those handles. You'll need them when things get loud again. Loud how? He smiled. Project scale. Success attracts noise. Also, someone will eventually microwave fish. We stared at the ficus, partners in dread. Then I added a calendar reminder. Buy ficus fertilizer. If myths grow toward messy light, maybe the ficus would too, given a little help. Or at least pity. The next bake club fell on the same day as a thunderstorm that turned the parking lot into a reflective pool. Everyone arrived damp and dramatic, perfect weather for carbs. I brought nothing, still on my responsible hiatus. But I did bring napkins, which turned out to be the rarest commodity in the building. Mark, newly emboldened by his fruit platter fame, had attempted macarons. They looked like tiny UFOs that had crash-landed. We applauded anyway. During the sugar commotion, facilities taped a new laminated sign near the sink. If you see a mess, you are empowered to fix it. It was such a facilities thing to do, I wanted to hug the sign. Empowerment. For crumbs. I wiped the counter like I was piloting a movement. Mid-afternoon, the storm knocked out Wi-Fi for 12 minutes. People wandered into the hallways as if released from a spell. A group formed near the fern wall to debate whether the office should have a soft focus hour, with no meetings and no Slack pings. Bake Club did it, someone said, gesturing vaguely. We made that up and now it's real. By 3 p.m., the internet stabilized and the suggestion had turned into a straw poll on Slack. Soft focus hour. Daily or twice a week? Twice a week won fast. My boss messaged me. You accidentally unionized attention. Accidentally? I wrote back, grinning. The first soft focus hour felt like a hush falling on a busy street. You could hear keyboards instead of notifications. A designer slid me a note on paper that read, Is this what our brains used to sound like? I stuck it to my monitor like a relic from an older kinder world. That evening, as the storm finally exhaled, I walked past the break room and saw the donation jar was full enough to clink. It's funny, nothing was perfect. The espresso machine still hissed, the ficus still sulked, and my calendar looked like a Tetris board. But the place felt truer. Less haunted by guesswork. More held up by handles we could grab when we slipped. 2 weeks later, a recruiter messaged me on LinkedIn with a role that was, frankly, shiny. Bigger scope. A title that sounded like a watch complication. Past me would have clicked through the JD until 2 a.m., then shown up the next day emotionally hungover on hypotheticals. Current me wrote back. Appreciate it, happy where I am, and closed the tab with a click that felt like a boundary snapping into place. I told Clara. She clutched her chest. Character development. In this economy. It's not forever, I said. It's for now. I want to finish what I started. Loyalty loaf, but as a life choice, she said. Work kept being work, messy, funny, occasionally miraculous. The cross-team project hit a point where our data pipeline and design cadence finally shook hands like old friends. In the retro, someone said, it felt like we were rowing in the same direction, not just on the same lake. I wrote that one down. Rowing Lake Loitering. Bake Club took a left turn into heritage recipes. People brought family things with stories attached. A grandmother's honey cake, an uncle's cornbread that only works in a cast iron pan, a biscotti that survived 3 apartment moves and 1 divorce. We put the stories in a shared doc. Mark titled it Cultural Archive, which should be a crime, and the comments became a strange, tender braid of who we are outside the building. I contributed a cardamom shortbread from my aunt, annotated with, do not skip the citrus zest, it's the part that makes you feel like windows opened. And then, because life enjoys symmetry, someone put a loaf on the counter with a sticky note. Not leaving. Just grateful. The note didn't scream. It didn't need to. People took a slice, smiled, and went back to their desks with the quiet knowledge that sometimes a thing is exactly what it says it is. 2:15 planning arrived like a parade with spreadsheets. I ran our kickoff, which felt illegal, me, at the front of the room, pointing to a roadmap like I had a license for roads. Jonas sat near the back, pretending to be a houseplant. The plan was crisp and a little brave, fewer projects, deeper bets, explicit trade-offs. When I finished, the VP asked, what are you worried about? 2 things, I said. Ambition creep, where we keep adding shiny bits, and folk policies, where we let old myths drive new decisions. I clicked to a slide titled, Myths we won't reboot. First bullet, in 2 big font, cake is not equal to quitting. The room laughed. Under it, urgency is not equal to importance. Busyness is not equal to impact. Quiet is not equal to disengaged. We built explicit guardrails. Write down outcomes before features, grade every idea against the same criteria, rehearse saying, not now. I propose we measure success not just by what shipped but by how many myths we retired along the way. If we win the work but lose the culture, I said, we're building a house on sand. After the meeting, my boss pulled me aside. That was clear and kind, she said. Both are rare. I walked back to my desk buzzing, then saw a DM from facilities. Ficus. We repotted it. Consider this an investment in Q2 photosynthesis. The ficus, newly proud, stood like a green flag. I added a tiny wooden skewer sign to its pot. Stay. Office graffiti for plants. On Slack, someone proposed an Oops Club for public, blame-free postmortems on little mistakes. The broken link, the oops push to prod, the cake on the printer. Bake Club cross-posted immediately. We bring snacks to Oops. If myth-breaking felt like pulling burrs from fabric, Oops Club felt like brushing them off together. Lighter. More human. The story doesn't end with a promotion party or a surprise departure or a chandelier of croissants, though, honestly, dream. It ends on a Tuesday with good light. I brought in a tray of scones, blueberry, crumbly, unapologetically triangular. No email. No sign. I put them down and went back to my desk. A few minutes later, I heard soft footsteps and a quiet, "Oh." That sounded like relief finding a chair. People came, took one, said thank you with crumbs in their smile, and left. No one asked where I was going. Someone asked for jam. Mid-morning, the leadership cohort met by the fern wall. We traded small wins like baseball cards. A meeting turned into an email. A tough conversation had early, a ficus that lived. When it was my turn, I said, "We kept the myths small. And we kept the good part big." They nodded like we all understood a thing you can't quite write on a slide. At 4:55 p.m., I ended a meeting 5 minutes early and paid no cookie debt. The sky did that late afternoon gold that makes office windows look like postcards. I packed my bag. Clara swung by, tapped the loyalty loaf emoji on my monitor, and said, "See you tomorrow, Carb Czar." "See you tomorrow," I said, locking my screen. On the way out, I straightened the faded neon card in the break room. "This dessert means nothing," and grinned at its sun-soft edges. It meant everything, actually. That meaning is something we choose, together. That a place can decide to be kinder on purpose. That you can bake a cake, cause a panic, write a new rule, and then, quietly, steadily, live by it. I held the door for a stranger, stepped into the ordinary evening, and thought about next week's bake. Maybe lemon bars. Maybe nothing. Either way, I'd be here. Not leaving. Just staying. Just making a little sweetness where I work, and a little work where I stay. Soft focus hours settled into the building like a new kind of weather. Twice a week, 2 to 3 p.m., Slack turned into a library and meetings evaporated like puddles in sun. The first few weeks, people treated it like contraband vacation, guilty, glancing around, half expecting to be scolded for working quietly. Then the output started showing up, more polished specs, fewer quick follow-ups. Bug tickets written so clearly they almost fixed themselves. Not everything needs ceremony. Sometimes it needs silence. During one of those hours, I took apart a gnarly risk doc and rebuilt it as 3 simple questions. What can break? How would we know? What do we do? It felt like folding a fitted sheet correctly for the first time. Suddenly everything had corners. I sent it to Jonas, who replied, "Ship this framing everywhere." Bake Club, meanwhile, discovered scones as a personality test. People debated crumb height like sports. Mark produced a crumb density index, of course, and a chart no one asked for. Facilities added one more laminated sign near the coffee machine. If the grinder screams, "Fill the hopper," we began to imagine a world governed by laminated common sense. Honestly, sign me up. That Friday, a new intern timidly put down a plate of slightly burnt brownies with a note. "Trying things is allowed, even if the edges are crispy." A chorus of "Yes, chef" broke out. Watching her grin at crumbs felt like standing in the doorway of a kinder office than the one I'd met on Ganache Monday. It was the same place, but we'd rotated it toward the light. On my walk home, the sky did that charcoal watercolor thing, and I realized I hadn't thought about leaving in weeks. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't need to turn a good thing into a hypothetical to prove I had options. Options are better when they're not escape hatches. They're just doors you don't have to use. Quarterly showcase arrived, the one where teams present work to the company like science fair for grown-ups. I labeled our board, "Miss, we didn't reboot," and taped up tiny cards with outcomes, fewer meetings, clearer handoffs, faster code reviews. For flair, and because I contain multitudes, I brought a small plate of lemon bars dusted like they'd survived a gentle blizzard. No signs, no subtext, just sugar laid calmly beside the artifacts. People crowded around the handoff diagram. "It's tidy," someone said reverently, like we'd tamed a dragon with post-its. The VP pointed at the risk questions and asked permission to steal them for ops. "Steal loudly," I said. He laughed. "The right kind of theft." Midway through, our CO paused at the lemon bars. "Do these mean anything?" he asked, eyes twinkling. "Yes," I said. "They mean lemon." We both grinned like conspirators in a victimless crime. Clara's board, 2 aisles down, showcased an accessibility overhaul. "Clean contrast is kind," her header read. I wanted to embroider it on a pillow and also our design system. Later, While dismantling the foam board forest, she bumped my shoulder. "You know what I like," she said. "We're getting good at making obvious things obvious on purpose." At closeout, Jonas handed me a tiny notebook. "4 handles," he said. On the first page, he'd written, "In loud rooms, carry quiet questions." I added my own under it, "In hungry rooms, carry slices." Meaning optional. The notebook felt like proof that growth could be portable, stitched, pocket-sized. The next myth tried to sneak in wearing a process badge. "If it's not urgent, it can wait forever." I saw it bloom in a backlog like moss. During planning, I drew a little graveyard on the whiteboard and wrote, "Someday is not a date." We set a small rule: every 2 weeks, 2 somedays. Get a real slot or a real goodbye. Deleting them felt like cleaning out a drawer, guilt morphing into relief. Meanwhile, Bake Club's Heritage Month turned into a rolling potluck of stories. A teammate brought tamales and an instruction manual that began, "Invite friends, it is a 2-person kindness." Someone else brought a cake her dad used to bake when he got good news and bad news, because both deserve a moment. The donation jar's note shifted from food bank to kitchen fund for the community center. And it felt exactly like the right plot twist, turned sweetness outward. One evening, a recruiter sent me another message, more polished than the last. I didn't answer right away. I took a long shower, thought about my project, my team, the ficus, the quiet hours. I wrote back the next morning with gratitude and a clear no. Not a defensive no. A steady one? It surprised me how good steady felt, like I'd finally learned the line between freedom and flinching. That afternoon, a junior dev DM'd, "How did you know to say no?" I told the truth. I didn't. I knew what I wanted to protect. We hopped on a call. I showed her the little notebook. We added a page together: protect time, not just timelines. Protect trust, not just tasks. She said it sounded like fortune cookies for managers. I said we could sell them at Bake Club for charity. We laughed, a little too loud for soft focus hour, and then wrote it down anyway. I finally took a real day off. Not the doctor at 2 p.m., Slack at 3 p.m. kind. A sanctioned, calendar-blocked, company-approved absence with sunscreen and an audiobook that sounded like sunlight. I left my laptop at home. The world did not catch fire. The espresso machine hissed at someone else. I swam, slowly. I ate a sandwich that tasted like it had a PhD in mayonnaise. I returned to the office the next day as if my spine had been replaced with a friendlier one. My inbox contained only 1 crisis and 3 compliments, which is a ratio I recommend. The crisis was minor and fixable, like a puppet show of a real problem. The compliments were specific, which means they stuck. I forwarded one to Jonas with, "Saving this for rainy days." He replied with a loaf emoji and, "You've built a weather system." That week, facilities unveiled a humble miracle: 2 extra quiet rooms and a shelf of basic snacks labeled emergency crackers. The laminated sign beneath them read, "Not for hoarding. For being human." We high-fived facilities like they'd landed a plane on a river. When I asked who pushed it through, they shrugged. "Y'all's soft focus thing made the case." I baked nothing and missed nothing. Meaning didn't need sugar to move now. It had legs of its own. Still, on Thursday, I sliced apples into a bowl and put a little card that said, "Fiber Club Unofficial." And people laughed, because once you've survived Dessertgate, all snacks are narrative. On the way out, I straightened the tiny stay sign in the ficus and found a new leaf unfurling like a slow yes. The plant had decided to participate in Q2. Excellent. One morning, months after the original cake, a new hire stopped me in the hallway. "You're the cake person, right?" she asked, half apologetic. I braced for folklore. "Historically, yes," I said. She smiled. "Cool. I just wanted to say, thanks. I joined during all the quiet hours and the Bake Club stuff, and it made the place make sense faster. The signs are funny, but the part where people explain, that helped. I wanted to bottle that and label it reason to stay." Instead, I said, "Welcome. Here's the only real rule: if you don't know, ask. If you do know, write it down. If you bake, label the allergens." She laughed. Deal. In the afternoon, I wrote a short doc, not a manifesto, just a crumb map. How we keep meaning small and good big. Bullet points like, say the thing. Retire myths when they creak. Make quiet on purpose. Feed each other sometimes. It went on the intranet under practices, not policies, because we're allergic to calcifying kindness. The doc ended with, when in doubt, bring lemon bars. They mean lemon. I still don't know how long I'll be here. That's not the point, I'm learning. The point is, while I want to be unmistakably here. Not in rumor, not in resignation drafts the cake wrote for me, but in the small, steady infrastructure of showing up. On Friday, I brewed the late afternoon pot and topped up the emergency crackers. I tucked a fresh neon card behind the faded one. It said, "This dessert means community." Maybe that's heavier than a break room deserves. Or maybe it's exactly right. People wandered in, grabbed a cracker or a coffee, and left a little lighter. I locked my screen, slung my bag, and texted Clara. "Scones Monday?" She replied. "Always." And I stepped into the evening knowing that staying, like baking, is mostly repetition. Measured, intentional, and worth sharing while it's warm.